Hey guys, welcome back to Clueless But Trying. I'm Lizz. This channel is where we're recovering, rebelling and raising merry hell.
This is what I always dreamed about. I'm over being scared, let them talk and let them stare. Go tell them that my time is now.
A couple of weeks ago I did the part 1 of the journey with my OCD and my journey to recovery basically, and I just wanted to come in and finish that story so that I've got it for prosperity, and so that perhaps other parents and young people can see that there is hope to be found and there is life after these incredible trials, because I'm right here talking about it. So I want to take you on a little journey back to 1994. At the end of the last video, which you can catch here by the way, or here, I'm not sure, I explained that my mum had just told me that I was going to a psychiatric hospital for young people, for under 18s. And I felt like my whole world had fallen apart and that nobody cared and everybody was just trying to get rid of me. I don't remember how long it took for me to get the space at the hospital. I don't remember it being very long. I do remember it being pretty sharpish between mum telling me that I was going and then me packing my bags ready to go. So the journey to the hospital was about 45 minutes. It's not particularly far away. It's on the other side of the New Forest. The place was actually called Lee House in Chandler's Ford, and it was the biggest old building I'd ever seen other than my school at the time. And Lee House used to actually be a sanatorium, so it had a long history of being a hospital, I guess you could say. And if you want to get a little bit woo-woo about it, there may well have been ghosts. That morning I remember driving up with mum into the car park and seeing this massive house again, but knowing that I was going to be moving in. And obviously I must have been worried, I must have been nervous, but I don't remember that now. It's such a long time ago. I do remember going in and being greeted by the nurses and being shown to my bedroom with my mum. We were allowed to make it our own, and I remember spending time with my mum doing that and getting like the fresh sheets and making the bed up. I remember hating the fact that there was a plastic sheet on the bed. I get why it was there, but I hated it and it was horrible and it felt overwhelmingly icky. Once we'd spent a bit of time putting the posters up, and all the letters and postcards and things that friends had sent for me to put up, which was incredibly kind, and I'm so grateful to them for these little glimmers of love that I got to put up on my walls because of them. Once I'd had a bit of time getting my room ready and everything, a nurse came along, and other nurses were really nice, absolutely wonderfully weird, crazy, calming, nurturing, wonderful individuals. There was a wonderful bunch of humans helping, and I dare say they were all there because they understood to some extent and they had a passion for helping kids like me. I remember being taken down to the girls' lounge. There was a girls' end and a boys' end, and it was all very East Wing, West Wing, and we'll pretend to be posh. I had a few kids run up to me and welcome me. Some were a little bit more calm about it. Others were like, "Hi, how you doing? Who are you? I'm so-and-so." And that was really fun. It was really overwhelming, but it was also very welcoming. And I also remember that there were some that were just sat there quietly hiding basically, and she clearly just wanted the whole world to go away. So that was the duality, I suppose, of coming into a place like this, is that we are incredibly mentally ill, sick children, but we are also just children. I was shown into the kitchen where we had washing machines, tumble dryer, kettle, dining table, everything, so that, you could make yourself cups of teas and orange juices and hot chocolates and all these things anytime you wanted, basically. It was just, they made it as much of a home from home as they could. So remembering that it was 1994 and we didn't have mobile phones, cell phones, anything like that. We actually had a pay phone under the stairs, well, one of the sets of stairs, because I think there was, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 sets of stairs throughout the entire house. It was, because it was that big. Anyway, this payphone was underneath the stairs in like a cute little cubby hole, and it would just ring intermittently, and it would be parents phoning for their kids, and whoever was nearest would answer it, and then you'd run off to go and find whoever the phone was for. And so obviously I did spend a lot of time talking to my mum on that phone, but we did have to be mindful for it not to be too long, because there was a lot of other kids and a lot of other parents trying to get through. I don't remember my mum going on that day. It is all very much a blur now. In fact, a lot of my childhood is a blur, because what would happen next at the hospital would be that my medication would be reviewed. So we had conversations with the psychiatrist, and I'm pretty sure my mum did as well, and we all talked, and I was considered psychotic. And so they actually gave me a tablet called haloperidol, which is an antipsychotic. I don't know if they still use it today. I'm going to look it up and I'll put it up as to whether it's still in use today. It's a pretty old medicine now. But I remember with that, it would get stuck an effervesce in my throat some mornings, because we'd have to go to the medicine room, because obviously everything was under lock and key, and you'd be given your tablets in one of those little cups, and then you'd be given some water, and you'd take it and you'd throw it back, and then you had to like open your mouth and show that you hadn't stashed it somewhere that you were like A, weren't not taking it, or B, was stashing stuff to perhaps do something not great with. But that haloperidol, some mornings the capsule would open and it would burn my insides, and there was many a morning where I would be like, it's happened again. I don't know why it happens some days and not others, but it would always be go and have a piece of toast, go and have a drink, get it to push on down. But it would take hours for that to get out of my system. We're talking till lunchtime before I felt like my esophagus was not burning with acid anymore. I was also put on Prozac, which is fluoxetine, and I also remember reading the book Prozac Nation back then. I might have to read that again. That was quite an eye-opener for me at that age. So I had antipsychotics, antidepressants, and I was reaching out to get therapy, to get cognitive behavioural therapy and occupational therapy, and just generally being in an environment where they were going to help me conquer my OCD. I think one of the worst moments for me when I started at Lee House was there was my psychiatrist, and we were in a family meeting, because you'd have them, I don't know if they're every month or every couple of months or something, but we were in a family meeting, and I can clearly remember, I want to call her Dr. Sex Kitten because of certain shoes she had. I laugh now because I can see one of my friends taking the mickey out of her shoes, because, you know, she's a psychiatrist in a young people's place, but she looked like she worked somewhere else. And we were teenagers mucking around. And that was the only control we had, was to take a little bit of mickey out of adults that perhaps we felt were controlling our lives. But I digress. The thing that I remember her for is stating in front of my mum that at 14 years old, I was going to be a career patient. I was going to always be in psychiatric hospital, and I remember being told that I was the worst case of OCD in the country at that time. And that made me feel crap. That made me feel awful. I don't know if she said it to try and put a rocket up my bum, or if she said it just absent-mindedly of how that might impact a 14-year-old. But what it did was make me feel awful, and it definitely didn't help. It made me feel like there was no hope, that I was stuck like this forever, that this absolute pit of despair that I was living in, that was it. There was nothing else. And unfortunately that's stuck with me to this day now. We're 30 years on from it now, and I can still remember seeing her saying it. A little bit more about the people that I was with. Now, we got to make firm friends, because when you're thrown into a situation like that where, your primary caregivers are not there and you have to make a community of your own, these other young people became my stability, my place for laughter. We shared the highs and we shared the really, really bad lows. And I remember so many of them fondly, and I've been lucky enough to find a few on Facebook over the years, and know that some of them are doing really well, and others are, like me, we're doing well, but then life has thrown other stuff at us that we've had to overcome. But it's really good to see people's faces and that they're still getting on and still enjoying life. There was a real what's the word? A cacophony, myriad of different types of mental health issues that were being treated at Lee House. There was me with my OCD. There was young people with alcoholism problems. There were schizophrenics. There were bipolars, manic depressive, eating disorders, bulimia and anorexia, boys and girls. We had a real smorgasbord, that's a good word for it, a smorgasbord of different issues, as it were, going on. And in some ways it was great because we could relate to each other, that what was going on was completely not natural. But it also meant that we taught each other things that perhaps at that age we didn't need to know. I'm not going to be giving any tips here about what I was and wasn't taught, but the one thing I will say is that I didn't know self-harm was a thing until I went to Lee House, and that had lasting consequences on my body, unfortunately. All my friends came from all over the country, from every section of life you can believe. I had one girl there that was actually at school with Prince William. And then we had people that were over from Guernsey and Jersey. People were coming to Lee House because there wasn't enough services for everybody to go to around the country. So to get a bed here in Lee House, you had to be the worst of the worst of the worst. And I didn't realise that until I was older and looked at the statistics for what psychiatric hospitals were around and who was there, who could get in, and it did just show me just how ill I was, and how grateful I am that I got in there, because I don't know what my life would look like without it. Every part of me has been shaped by these experiences, just as in any experience through life does. But mine certainly has been unique. Let's talk about what a day looked like at Lee House. I was obviously in my own bedroom. It wasn't long until I actually had somebody come and share my bedroom with me, because my bedroom was massive. And quite frankly, there could have been like 6 people in there. But it was just me and this other young girl who I got on with really, really well. And she had OCD as well. So it was really nice to find somebody else for the very first time who had OCD. And that was my age. That was really important to know that I wasn't alone. And her OCD rituals, some were similar and some were completely different. But we both understood the complexity around the mind games as to why we were doing certain things. And so we had grace for each other, which was really lovely, to be honest. I do hope she's doing well now. A day in the life at Lee House looked like the nurses coming round at 7 a.m, ringing a bell to get up, which was always a bit of a shock to the system. And they'd come in and just be like, "Hey Liz, time to get up for breakfast, up you get now." And as is normal for a bunch of teenagers, they had to do this several times. Because, some people would get up, other people wouldn't. And then the idea was that you would go, and there would be various things for different people because of medication and everything. But for me, it would then be to go and have a shower and brush your teeth and everything like that. And then you'd go down, you get your medication, because you had to have your medication with food. So we'd line up, get our meds, then we'd walk through to the cafeteria where we had a nice breakfast. They'd always have the radio on quietly, which was nice, and a lot of the songs from that era take me right back to being in that cafeteria. And then, of course, you'd have the people that were struggling with eating disorders. They had their own table where they all had to eat together, and obviously that was fraught. They would quite often be sat there for hours trying to eat a single piece of toast because, you know, their whole entire being was telling them not to. I don't claim to know enough about eating disorders, but I do know the effect it has on people, and I've seen the devastation that it causes. And sadly, a couple of years ago, I did actually lose a friend to it from somebody that I had known at Lee House. Once we'd had breakfast, we were then to go and meet in the girls' lounge. The boys would come up to the girls' lounge as well, and it was like morning meeting of what was going on that day. We would be told if we were having certain therapies or reminded of what our schedule was. Certain people would get to go to the school for morning sessions. Some people would have it in the afternoon, vice versa. The school on site was really lovely, and they actually made it so accessible, the flexibility to learn on my own terms. When I was having a good day, if I was having a bad day, we did other stuff, and it would only be a couple of hours a day, if that, which I think has helped with my transition with the kids. My kids being home educated is that I am well aware that you don't need to be in school all that time to amply learn the information. They also had the most wonderful art room. It was this wonderful old building, again, because, you know, this is an old property, big high roofs, big beams, big, you know, the massive white kitchen sinks that you see in the country houses, and just massive tables where we could paint, and that really was one of my biggest outlets. So by 1 p.m, it would then be lunchtime, and just like when you're in a normal general hospital, you choose your food the night before for what you're going to have, so the chef knows what he's cooking. And the food was great. I was a vegetarian, so I had always had the vegetarian options, and again we were back in the cafeteria. The eating disorders group had their little table, the rest of us had different tables around. And then once you'd eaten, it was basically free time for a while. So you could go up to your room, you could hang out with your friends, you could go to the lounge, watch TV, put music on. Very, very relaxed in general. And then in the afternoon, it was the opposite of what had happened in the morning. So if you'd done school in the morning, in the afternoon, you did therapies. It very much changed depending on what anybody needed, so it was really fluid as to what was happening, but they had these base times that things happened, and at 3 o'clock was always tea and biscuits time. It was so British but so lovely and so needed, and I still have 3 o'clock afternoon snack because of it, because I think once you become institutionalised to some extent, little bits of it always stay with you, and for me it's that routine that I like, I guess. So it's not a negative, I've kept it. So we'd have tea and biscuits, little packets of biscuits, get like 2 custard creams and a cup of tea or a hot chocolate or something. And again, we were allowed to just sort of relax and do what we wanted in the lounge area with that. I remember at the time we were constantly watching Sister Act. After afternoon tea, then we would it would be getting on for dinner time, so of course we'd all go down for dinner, and then after dinner, about 6 o'clock, we all got back in the girls' lounge, boys and girls again, because this time it was what did we want to do with the evening, and again it would usually be a consensus about what was wanted to do, but sometimes you'd have some people that just wanted to sit and read and just chill out, and other times, which was quite often me, I wanted to go and do something. We had a big indoor gymnasium, so we could go and do basketball, loads of grounds, so we could just go out for a walk and that, you know, go and see the nature. One of our favourite things to do that nurses taught us was okay to do was to go down into the field at the back of the house and scream. And I cannot tell you how much therapeutic benefits there are just screaming at the top of your lungs and letting all that energy out. So yeah, with basketball, rounders, cricket, going to the gym, we did meditation. Oh, we had a pool table, we had a snooker table, we had, what else did we have? Ping pong. There was an awful lot to do. And then by about 7:30, that was wind down time. So that was just, watching the TV, chilling out with your friends. Before bedtime, I think was about 9:00. I think that was when we were all supposed to be upstairs and getting sleep. Now, obviously that didn't happen because we're a bunch of teenagers, but the idea was there. And some people went to bed early because they were knackered. Sometimes I would, and then other nights, the majority of nights for me, I just couldn't sleep. I've never slept very well. My brain works 1,000 to the dozen. I spent a lot of time reading in bed, just trying to turn my brain off. So yeah, I guess that's what would happen in a daytime. Other than that, you would get to, quote unquote, earn weekends home, i.e. you had completed your therapies, or whatever it was that kind of your challenge was for that week to get through. If you did it consistently for a couple of weeks, you could then earn your weekend home. I don't think I ever missed a weekend home. I was the good girl, so I always did whatever I could to get home to see my mum and see my dogs, Ben and Charlie. But I know that there were teenagers there that found it absolutely impossible to engage and therefore lost their weekends. And I'm not particularly sure how helpful that is in the long run, because the impact of not being able to go home for them was considerable. And then on the other side of that spectrum is some people didn't actually have a safe place to go home to, and so would inadvertently cause reasons that they weren't allowed to go home because it wasn't safe to go to. I stayed in Lee House for nearly 6 months during that stay. I had 2 stays at Lee House, and I would say that the CBT that I learnt around OCD and the general confidence in myself and understanding of myself benefited me greatly, and went back to school and was welcomed with open arms, thankfully, again. But by the time I'd done my GCSEs, everything started falling apart again, and that's when I ended up back in Lee House again. And unfortunately, that is how it went for the next, 5 or 6 years, I suppose. And again, now with hindsight, I think what I needed to do was mature. I think a lot of getting better was having space held for me that I was safe and I was okay and I was learning, but that I also needed my prefrontal cortex to grow and expand and for me to learn. And it wasn't until I was about 21 that I finally had what I would consider time to be a normal young person. And I definitely made up for it in those couple of years after I'd got out of all psych hospitals. I think I was still under the local community mental health nurse team for quite a while. Even once I was pregnant with my son, they actually put me back under the mental health team just to keep an eye on me whilst I was pregnant, which was really, really useful. But yeah, gosh, it feels like an absolute lifetime ago. I know that that's a massive part of who I am and where I've come from, and I definitely need to write a book one day to talk about the lessons learned from it. But I think as somebody who tried to top themselves 5 times, one time at school, I think it's really important for other people that are struggling, that are going through it as a teenager, or are the parents to a child struggling, that a lot of this relies on holding space and being safe place for your children so that they can grow up. Speaking personally, my son, over the last couple of years, because he's now 20, the synapses are firing in different ways, the prefrontal cortex is coming in, and because I've held that safe space for him and I took away all the ridiculous asks from the education system and we learn on our own terms, he's now able to start with a solid foundation and grow up and grow on, which I think is what Lee House did for me and the other psychiatric hospitals that I was in. hopefully I've given my son a less traumatic version. I don't know. We try our best, right? There was many other psychiatric hospitals that I was in and community houses and such before I met my son's dad and a whole new group of friends and a whole new life that I didn't think was possible. So if you're mum, dad, guardian to a child that's in psychiatric hospital and finding it really, really hard, please just keep holding that space for them. The biggest part for me is your mum intuition. My mum taught me through her mum intuition to listen to yourself, because she knew what I needed and she fought to get it, no matter what the system said. And I have gone on to do the same for my children. That I've gone against the grain. People have mocked me and said, it's odd to take them out and rah, rah, rah. I don't care. I know my children. I foresee the future that they deserve, and it doesn't involve being put down and traumatised by systems that are no longer working. And whatever I can do to help my children and also to help you with your children is a massive win to me. Keep being rebellious, keep recovering. It's a constant life path, this journey of recovering, growing, rebelling. Thanks so much for being here. I hope you found it interesting and useful. See you next time, guys. Bye.
Time's up.